The flames were already creeping down the hillside when Station 32 pulled up to the modest one-story home at the edge of the evacuation zone. Smoke curled through the trees, thick and suffocating, as the wildfire devoured everything in its path. Captain Jim Reynolds stepped out of the truck, squinting through the haze. "All right, let's move fast. We've got one stubborn homeowner refusing to leave." They approached the front door, where an older man stood defiantly on the porch, a worn garden hose clutched tightly in his hands. His name, according to dispatch, was Henry Palmer, a retired widower. He looked calm, almost too calm for a man standing in the path of an inferno. "You need to evacuate, sir," Jim said, his voice firm but steady. "The fire's moving fast. We don't have much time." Henry shook his head, tightening his grip on the hose. "I have everything I need. I'm not leaving." Jim exchanged a glance with Chris, his lieutenant, who sighed heavily. They'd seen this before. Homeowners too attached to their property, convinced they could fight off a firestorm with nothing but a garden hose and sheer will. "Mr. Palmer," Chris tried, softer this time. "We know you love your home, but it's not safe here. Please, let us take you somewhere safe." Henry smiled, but there was something distant in his eyes, something that sent a chill down Jim's spine. "This house, it's all I have left. I can't go." Jim could hear the fire roaring closer, the heat pressing against them like an invisible wall. His gut screamed at him to grab the man and haul him out by force, but something about Henry's eerie calm made him hesitate. "You have to leave," Jim pressed. "If you stay, you'll—" "I had to stay," Henry interrupted, his voice eerily steady. "I promised." Jim frowned. "Promised who?" Henry didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked into the backyard, dragging the useless hose behind him. Frustration gnawed at Jim's patience. "We don't have time for this," he barked at Chris. "We need to move on." Chris hesitated. "We can't force him, Cap." Jim cursed under his breath, taking one last look at Henry, standing in the yard as if the fire wasn't closing in on him. "We're coming back for you," he called out. Henry didn't even look back. Hours later, when the flames had finally been beaten back, they returned. The house was gone. Nothing but a smoldering skeleton remained where it once stood, blackened beams jutting from the rubble like ribs of a long-dead beast. Jim walked through the ashes, his boots crunching against charred debris. And then he saw him. Henry Palmer was lying in the backyard, clutching the melted remains of the garden hose. His face was peaceful, almost serene, as if he had never been afraid. His final words echoed in Jim's head. "I had to stay." Chris knelt beside him, swallowing hard. "Damn it!" Jim ran a hand down his face, guilt sinking deep into his bones. He had tried. They had all tried. But some people just wouldn't leave. "Why did he stay?" Chris asked, more to himself than anyone. "Why do they always stay?" Jim didn't have an answer. Back at the station, the report came in. Jim skimmed through the details of the fire's progression, but one line made him freeze. The residence was reported vacant for several weeks prior to the fire. His stomach dropped. "What?" Chris muttered, reading over his shoulder. "No, that's not possible. We saw him." Jim's mouth went dry. "We talked to him." They both sat in stunned silence, staring at the report. There were no recent records of Henry Palmer living in the house. Neighbors confirmed it had been empty for weeks, ever since his funeral. Chris's voice wavered. "But how?" Jim didn't answer. He was thinking about Henry's calm demeanor, his insistence that he had to stay. A sinking realization clawed at him. Henry hadn't been fighting to protect his house. He had been keeping a promise to someone long gone, maybe even to himself. Later that night, when Jim checked the station's truck, his hands trembled as he wiped soot from the door. There, etched faintly in the ash, were words that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for trying." The next morning, when Jim drove past the ruins of Henry's house, he could have sworn he saw someone standing in the backyard. A figure holding a garden hose, watching the sunset. Some promises never die, some souls never leave, and some fires never truly go out.